Bruce Willis was once the definition of strength on screen. He was the man audiences trusted to survive explosions, outsmart villains, and walk away from impossible situations with a smirk on his face. For decades, he did not just play heroes. He became one in the minds of millions. That is why seeing his life today feels so deeply painful for fans around the world. At around 71, Bruce Willis is no longer living the fast, unstoppable life that made him one of Hollywood's most unforgettable stars. The man who once carried huge films with confidence, humor, and raw presence is now living a much quieter and more fragile chapter. And that contrast is what makes the story so heartbreaking. What hurts people most is not scandal, failure, or controversy. It is the silence. Bruce Willis built his legacy on energy. He had a face, a voice, and a style that felt larger than life. Whether he was playing John McClane, a haunted soul, or a mysterious stranger, he always brought power to the screen. He looked like a man who could handle anything. But real life is often crueler than fiction. As the years passed, the world slowly began to realize that something was changing. Then came the painful truth. His health had become a serious concern, and the strong image people had carried of Bruce for so long suddenly felt distant. Fans who grew up watching him could hardly believe that such a powerful figure had entered such a vulnerable stage of life. And yet, what makes this story even more emotional is the love surrounding him. Bruce is not facing this chapter alone. His wife, his children, and even those from earlier parts of his life have remained close, showing the world that behind the fame is a family holding on to every precious moment. That kind of loyalty is rare, and it says a lot about the man Bruce Willis has always been away from the cameras. There is something devastating about watching a legend grow quiet, not because he is forgotten, but because he is remembered so clearly. People still see the fearless star he used to be, and that memory makes the present even harder to accept. Bruce Willis is now living a life far removed from the spotlight he once ruled. And for many fans, that reality is not just sad. It is almost impossible to think about without emotion. Bruce Willis did not become a legend overnight. Long before the fame, the money, and the worldwide recognition, he was just a young man trying to find his place in a world that offered no guarantees. He did not have the polished image of a traditional Hollywood star. He was not the obvious choice to become one of the most iconic actors of his generation. In many ways, that made his rise even more remarkable. There was something different about Bruce from the beginning. He had a rough charm, a certain unpredictability, and a kind of natural cool that could not be taught. He did not seem manufactured by the industry. He felt real. That authenticity helped people connect with him in a way that many stars never achieve. Audiences did not feel like they were watching someone pretend to be tough. They felt like Bruce Willis truly carried that spirit inside him. When his breakthrough came, it changed everything. Suddenly, he was no longer a struggling actor trying to be noticed. He became a face the world could not ignore. And once he stepped into major roles, he turned that opportunity into a legacy. Film after film, he built the image of a man who could be fearless, funny, damaged, and powerful all at once. He was not just an action star. He had presence. He had timing. He had that rare quality that made even simple moments unforgettable. That is why the sadness surrounding his life today feels so heavy. People are not simply reacting to a celebrity growing older. They are reacting to the contrast between who Bruce Willis was at his peak and the quiet reality he lives in now. The man who once seemed impossible to break has become a symbol of human fragility, and that is hard for many people to accept. But maybe the emotional weight of this story comes from something deeper. Bruce Willis represents a certain era of strength, a time when movie stars felt larger than life. He stood for resilience, confidence, and survival. To see that image soften with time is a reminder that even the strongest figures we admire are still human. And perhaps that is why fans continue to hold on so tightly to his memory. They are not only mourning what has changed, they are honoring everything he once gave them: the excitement, the confidence, the unforgettable performances, the feeling that no matter how bad things got on screen, Bruce Willis would somehow make it through. Now, the world can only watch, remember, and hope that love is giving him comfort in this quieter chapter of his life. But the tragedy of Bruce Willis is not only about what the world sees today. It is also about what people now look back on with completely different eyes. Moments that once seemed normal, professional, or unremarkable have taken on a painful new meaning. Fans began revisiting his later years in film and wondering how much he may have already been struggling while still trying to keep going. That thought alone is enough to break a lot of hearts. For a long time, Bruce Willis was known as one of the hardest working men in Hollywood. He appeared in film after film, often at a pace that seemed almost impossible to maintain. Some people questioned why he was doing so many projects, especially in the later stage of his career. At the time, critics saw it as overexposure. Others assumed it was just business. But after the truth about his condition became public, the story felt very different. Suddenly, those years did not look like a star fading away. They looked like a man pushing himself to work while he still could. That changes everything. Because when fans now watch those final performances, they are not just watching Bruce Willis the actor. They are watching Bruce Willis the man, trying to hold on to the thing that defined so much of his life. Acting was not just his profession. It was his identity. It was how the world knew him, how audiences connected with him, and how he expressed something powerful without always needing a lot of words. So, the idea that he may have continued working while privately facing growing difficulty makes his story even more emotional. There is also something deeply human in that struggle. Many people, even outside Hollywood, know what it feels like to keep going while something inside is changing. To smile in public while quietly dealing with fear. To continue showing up because stopping feels even scarier. Bruce Willis may have been a global icon, but that kind of silent endurance is something ordinary people understand very well. And maybe that is why his story now reaches beyond celebrity news. It is no longer just about fame or movies. It is about aging, vulnerability, family, identity, and loss. It is about what happens when a man who once seemed indestructible is forced into a chapter he never asked for and cannot control. That is what makes Bruce Willis at this stage of life so hard to talk about. Not because the world stopped loving him, but because it never did. And sometimes, the people we love most are the hardest to watch fade from the light. What makes Bruce Willis's story even more heartbreaking is that his decline did not happen in a world of privacy. It happened under the shadow of fame, where every change in appearance, every public photo, and every small update became a topic of discussion. For most people, growing older and facing serious health problems is painful enough. But for someone like Bruce Willis, it happened while the whole world was still comparing him to the man he used to be. That is a cruel kind of pressure. People do not just remember Bruce as a famous actor. They remember him as a symbol. He represented toughness, confidence, and that rare kind of masculinity that felt effortless. He did not need to shout to seem powerful. He did not need to overact to command attention. He simply had that presence. So when the public began to realize that life had changed for him in such a serious way, the reaction was not just sympathy, it was grief. In many ways, fans feel like they are losing more than a celebrity. They feel like they are losing a piece of their own past. Bruce Willis was part of an era. His films were tied to memories of childhood, family movie nights, teenage years, and the golden age of action cinema. For millions of people, his face is connected to a time when life felt simpler, stronger, and more exciting. That is why his condition feels so personal to so many strangers. It is not only about him. It is about what he represented in their lives. And yet, through all of this sadness, there is still something deeply moving about the way his family has responded. They have not turned his suffering into spectacle. They have shown care, patience, and dignity. In a world obsessed with constant exposure, they chose protection over attention. That choice says everything. It shows that Bruce Willis is not being treated as a legend first, but as a human being first. Maybe that is the real lesson hidden inside this painful story. Fame cannot stop illness. Success cannot freeze time. Strength cannot defeat every battle. Even the men who once looked invincible eventually face something they cannot fight with force or charm. And that is why Bruce Willis's life today feels so sad. Not because his legacy is gone, but because it remains so alive in people's hearts. The stronger the memory, the deeper the ache. The brighter the star once burned, the harder it is to watch the light grow quiet. There is also a painful irony in the way Bruce Willis is remembered. For years, he played men who refused to surrender, men who kept going when everything around them was falling apart, men who absorbed fear, pain, and chaos without letting the world see them break. That image became so powerful that many people unconsciously believed it belonged to Bruce himself, not the actor, the man. As if someone who had played resilience so convincingly could somehow be protected from life's cruelest turns. But no one is protected forever. That is what makes this story feel heavier than ordinary celebrity sadness. It forces people to confront something they often try to avoid. The heroes they admired were never invincible. The faces that defined entire generations were always human underneath the myth. Bruce Willis may have looked unshakable on screen, but off-screen he was always subject to the same fragile reality that touches every family eventually. Illness does not care about legacy. Time does not pause for talent. And the world keeps moving, even when one of its brightest stars begins to fade into a quieter existence. For fans, that realization can feel deeply personal. They are not just reacting to headlines. They are reacting to the collapse of an illusion they cherished for decades. Bruce Willis represented the idea that grit could carry you through anything, that confidence could overcome fear, that humor could survive even in disaster. Watching his life change so drastically feels like watching that old belief weaken in real time. It reminds people that even the strongest spirit cannot always choose the outcome. And yet, maybe that is not the end of his story at all. Because although Bruce Willis may no longer dominate movie screens or command the spotlight the way he once did, something important still remains untouched. The impact, the memory, the emotional imprint he left on millions of people. Illness may alter a life, but it cannot erase what that life meant. It cannot remove the moments he gave audiences, the characters he made unforgettable, or the strange comfort his presence brought to generations of viewers. That may be why the sadness around him feels so enduring. It is mixed with gratitude. People are grieving what has changed, but they are also holding tightly to what still survives. The legacy is still there. The admiration is still there. The love is still there. And perhaps, in the middle of all this sorrow, that is the only kind of victory that time cannot take away. And perhaps the saddest part of all is this. Bruce Willis did not disappear because people stopped caring. He stepped away while the world was still watching, still remembering, still holding on to the image of the man who once seemed too strong to ever slow down. That makes his story feel different from so many other Hollywood endings. This is not the story of a fallen star abandoned by fame. It is the story of a beloved figure whose silence became more powerful than his voice ever was. There is something deeply haunting about that kind of silence. When Bruce Willis was at his peak, he had a way of filling every scene with life. He could make danger feel thrilling, sadness feel subtle, and confidence feel effortless. He did not need long speeches or exaggerated emotion. A look, a pause, a half smile was enough. That was his power. He made presence feel like an art form. And now, knowing that such a commanding presence has entered such a fragile chapter, fans cannot help but feel a sense of loss that goes beyond words. It is not only the loss of who he was. It is the loss of what he made people feel. Bruce Willis gave audiences reassurance. In his films, no matter how bad things became, there was always a feeling that someone strong was still standing in the middle of the chaos. He represented endurance. He represented nerve. He represented the kind of cool strength people wish they had in their own lives. That is why his story hurts so much now. It forces people to face the truth that even the men who once made us feel safe are not untouched by time. Still, there is beauty in the way his life is being held together by love. The spotlight may have dimmed, but care remains. Family remains. Memory remains. These things may not erase the pain, but they give this chapter a kind of tenderness that makes it even more emotional. Bruce Willis may be living far from the noise of Hollywood now, but he is not living without meaning. He is surrounded by the people who matter most. And perhaps that is the only fame that truly matters in the end. For many fans, Bruce Willis is no longer just an action icon. He has become something else. A reminder, a symbol of how quickly life can change, a lesson in fragility, dignity, and love. And that may be why, even now, his story continues to touch so many hearts in such a deep and unforgettable way. What makes this chapter of Bruce Willis's life even more emotional is that the pain does not belong only to him. It belongs in different ways to everyone who loves him. Illness like this changes the life of a whole family. It changes routines, conversations, expectations, and even the meaning of ordinary moments. Things that once felt small suddenly become precious. A smile, a glance, a peaceful afternoon, a memory shared at the right time. When someone the world sees as larger than life enters such a vulnerable stage, the people closest to them are often the ones carrying the deepest emotional weight. And that is where Bruce Willis's story becomes more than a celebrity headline. It becomes a family story, a human story, a story about what remains when fame no longer matters. For years, Bruce Willis lived in a world driven by speed, pressure, and performance. Film sets, interviews, premieres, contracts, cameras, everything around him was built on momentum. But life now seems to move at a different pace, slower, more careful, more intimate. And while that change may look sad from the outside, it also reveals something powerful. It shows what is still standing when all the noise falls away. Love is still standing. Loyalty is still standing. The bond between a father and his children is still standing. That may be the most moving truth in all of this. Bruce Willis spent decades entertaining the world, but in this chapter, the world is no longer the center of the story. His family is. The applause is gone, but devotion remains. The scripts are gone, but real emotion remains. The public image may have softened, but the private meaning of his life may be stronger than ever. There is a quiet kind of dignity in that. Maybe not the kind Hollywood usually celebrates, but the kind that matters most when everything else begins to fade. That is why so many people struggle to talk about Bruce Willis today without emotion, because his story touches something universal. Everyone knows, or will one day know, what it means to watch someone they love change. Everyone knows the helplessness of wishing strength could solve what strength cannot solve. Everyone knows the ache of wanting just a little more time with the version of someone they remember best. Bruce Willis may no longer be the man the world once watched on giant screens, but he is still deeply present in the hearts of those who love him, and maybe that is the final truth behind why his life feels so sad now. Not because he has been forgotten, but because he still means so much.